So welcome, Arti. We greatly appreciate your leadership. As always, at all things at SETC, we like to begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all of the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So please, tell me about the origin of the Definity Foundation. How are you disrupting multiple ecosystems and its development?
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. So Definity actually started it was seeded by the proceeds from the demutualization of what was then known as economical insurance, which is now Definity Insurance. And economical was a cooperative. And in 2018, Definity was created as part of the agreement to demutualize economical, where they set aside $100 million of the proceeds from the demutualization, which was then to create this foundation. So it lay dormant until 2021, which is when the demutualization happened, which is when I was hired to start in February 2022. But from the onset, I have to give the board full credit for their desire to really address the roots of inequality. And I think about the Ford Foundation, and they talk about inequality, saying that justice begins when inequality ends. Mm-hmm. And our values are really rooted in community, integrity, and justice. From the very, very beginning, we knew we didn't want to do a charitable model of philanthropy. We wanted a justice model where we're really acknowledging the wrongs that happened and really working with partners to help address that. And so our focus, and we've named it, specifically is Black, Indigenous, racialized groups, and women and color, the intersection of those, because even amongst that, women and youth are still furthest behind. And so we've made a real effort to think about what we want to fund and how we want to show up as a philanthropic organization, as a relational grant maker, as one where our beliefs are rooted in community-led decision-making, in shared learning, and maximizing resources for underserved populations, underserved communities, and where community knows, like they know best, they have the solutions and the ingenuity to address problems that affect them most. So how can we support initiatives that enable that, or that honor the decisions, and enable community to make those decisions?
That's great. Thank you. So can you articulate Definity Foundation's mission and vision for me?
Yeah, the mission and vision, very interestingly, it's very, very broad. It's, I think our vision is about a flourishing world. And, our mission is really to make sure that we have thriving communities. And the interesting part is when we think of our ultimate goal, however, we have to actually update our website, because it was actually done well before we really thought through a lot of these things. And so our ultimate goal, our ultimate mission is really to work with charitable partners to be able to tackle inequity, barriers to good health and opportunity, and climate-related challenges. But when we think of our ultimate goal, if I put that in plain language, it really is about addressing the roots of socioeconomic, health, and climate-related inequities. Right. And so that's the ultimate goal of the foundation. Yeah.
So how important is impact investing and philanthropic innovation to you in your work?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things we've been grappling with is, if we want to achieve our mission and our ultimate goal of tackling inequities, we can't just do it with granting dollars. As a foundation, one of the things we're beginning to think through is how can we bring all our assets to bear to advance our mission. So when we think of, or how do we bring all our capital? But when I think of capital, it's not just money, it's not just financial capital, it's human capital, it's social capital, it's all the different, like it's access to relationships, networks, influence, policy, like it's everything we can bring, even our own people, our talent. How do we bring that to bear? And impact investing is obviously one part of that, which is an important part, because we want to make sure that everything we have, all our resources, that we're viewing this holistically. We're not a grant maker, a philanthropic organization that has a small bucket of grant making and that's going to achieve our mission. We're a philanthropic organization whose purpose is to tackle inequities. And if that's the case, everything from all the money we have to the people, the talent, the influence, the resources, our spaces, even like how do we use our space in a different way? How do we use everything to achieve our mission? But you asked me about impact investing, so I will take that segment out of the broader piece of using all our assets to achieve our mission. And again, an important part is using the money we have and investing it in, ensuring our investments are aligned with our mission. So making sure we're investing in initiatives that can help propagate more equity in the sector. So we just started, right? We started in basically operating. We started operating fully with me as a CEO in February of 2022. By October, we made our first impact investing, which was to Raven. And it was the Raven Fund 2. And it, like, everyone was so new to it, even without really fully understanding or comprehending how we do things. We borrowed due diligence from others that had already done the due diligence. We tried to, like, really utilize the help of resources around us to help us actually just make this first investment, because we learn as we do. We've always been a foundation that learns as we do. So even when we started grant making, we put the things out there. We put our application out there and said, look, if you have any feedback, let us know. We're just learning as we do. And that's the same way we're approaching impact investing. So then we joined the MRI Collaborative so that we can understand more what's happening in the space, share due diligence with others. We're in the midst of trying to change our object so that we can do different types of impact investing, because otherwise we're bound. Like, we only have one object right now, which is basically to give grants to qualified donees, and it doesn't allow us to engage in some of the really in interesting initiatives. But we're definitely on a learning journey, Sarah, like total learning journey at the moment. We realize we don't have the capacity. We're very, very new. But we're serious, which is why we started it with our first impact investment. And we're also starting to think about responsible investing. Apart from impact investing, how do we even just ensure that our investments are responsibly invested?
Right. Oh, wow. So what inspires you most about your current model at Definity Foundation?
Yeah, I think what really excites me is that it's rooted in a set of beliefs. And as I mentioned previously, we tested a few hypotheses. When we first started, like, we validated what we thought was right. Like, for example, if a hypothesis is to take a racial equity lens to our work, enabling us to target our efforts to particular groups and systems that are failing the most, and for whom the impacts are most inequitable. In order to do that, we need to take a racial equity lens to our work. So meaning, if we want to target our efforts on the needs of groups that are most underserved and for whom the impacts are most inequitable, then we need to take a racial equity lens to our work. So that's one hypothesis we tested, right? Another hypothesis we tested is that, if we want to allow organizations to allocate resources where it's more needed to make room for innovation, emergence, and impact, then we need to offer long-term and flexible, funding. That, to gain a deeper, that we need to take a relational approach to philanthropy to gain a deeper understanding of the work, to reduce power imbalance, and to take up less time with grantees, for example. So based on the hypothesis that we tested, we had core beliefs that really rooted how we were going to design our framework. So that, our core belief is that we're only tinkering at the edges if we're not focused on the roots and impacts of inequality in all that we do. Okay. So meaning anything we fund has to result in greater equity. If they're just talking about equity, but you're not seeing what the initiative is going to do and how it's going to result in greater equity, that's not something we should be, interested in, right? Because then it's very shallow, right? That we're going to maintain close, respectful, and active relationships with partners and grantees, through engaged philanthropy. I mentioned about flexible funding that, we can have greater impact by working collaboratively with like-minded foundations, because it requires a lot of resources that we can bring to bear. But also by doing that, working collaboratively with like-minded foundations, we can ensure that more money is flowing to groups that need it the most, right? Equity deserving groups, and that the brilliance and ingenuity required for change exists in communities. And continuous learning is a core belief of us, that we must really be intentionally listening and courageously doing, not being afraid to adapt, which is why we learn, we ask people, and then we iterate. And that's been our approach. But in terms of that's been our approach as a foundation. And in terms of our grant making, our approach is really to partner with funder, community collectives, intermediaries to address those disparities, because they can reach the groups that we can't reach on our own. If we were to do one by one project funding, it's going to be like a faucet dripping. But if we funded deep and funded heavily collectives, intermediaries, etc., to provide grants, capacity building, shared learning, to have components of community leadership, policy advocacy, field building, grassroots mobilization, their reach, their scope, their ability to get the work done would go much further along than if we tried to do it.
Right. Oh, that's great. So earlier you mentioned that Definity Foundation is broadening the objectives of the company. And I'm wondering, what other challenges or barriers do you face in the work at Definity Foundation, and how have you and your team, how are you working to overcome those?
Yeah, so there's some, like you mentioned, there's regulatory changes. So the shift to allow funding to non-qualified donees is great, but at the same time with that shift, there was an anti-avoidance rule, which now means you can't give to a charity to give to another charity. Because our objects are not yet changed, we're like in limbo, where we're stuck in the middle. We can't give to a charity to give to another charity. We can't fund a non-qualified donee because we don't have charitable purpose that allow us to do that. Right. So that's a big challenge we're facing right now. So we know it's only a short-term challenge, because once we make the change, we can move ahead. But for now, that is that is one of the challenges. The other, we're new. So, in any new organization, it's exciting because you can start with a blank sheet of paper. Yeah. But it also takes time. You want it done like today, and look, we've moved fast, but we can't get to be 100-year-old organization in 1 year, kind of thing. But thankfully, our team, the combination of our team, has like decades of philanthropic experience. And so by bringing that along, we are able to speed things up a bit more. I think, challenges include like communication, right? Like we still don't have an updated website. Like just little things to help others know us. Or the other challenge, is you're always torn because we're taking a proactive approach. We decided early on we were going to be a proactive grant maker, which means we go out to community, see who's doing good work, who's really advancing the strategies in the way I mentioned of intermediaries and collectives doing the things I just mentioned earlier.
Right.
So we go out to community to say, okay, look, who's doing great work. Well, some of the challenges there is you might miss some. It might take a while to really get to all the communities.
Right.
The other downside is people will be like, well, how come you don't have an open call? But for me, treating everyone equally and having an open call is the most inequitable thing we can do, because how many times have we heard of funders having open calls only to decline 90% of the people that came in, and everyone did that work, right? So we've kind of we're one of the challenges is finding the right balance of being able to reach out to the people proactively, being able to take in, people can email us anytime they want as well. It's on our website, they can email us, and being able to respond to those respectfully. And where we see that there's opportunity, making the time to be able to speak to those people and see who else might be out there. So really it's about the challenge of broadening our networks, the challenge of understanding the landscape and where resources are flowing minimally to which community, so that we can focus on those. The challenge of, like I said, just the criticism and optics of not having an open call.
Right. Absolutely. So how do you feel about the future of impact investing and philanthropy in Canada?
Listen, I'm really, really hopeful, because more and more there's a lot of traction on impact investing. So, in spirit, 100% impact investing. McConnell just announced towards 100% of impact investing. Like I said, we're not there. We're just teeny weeny scraping literally that. We're trying to get to a place where we can be proud and say, that's where we want to head. But the reality is, people had to ask me today, our funds are not we didn't think through. When we started, the funds were in the bank. We just had to get them invested. It was taking too long. So it took 6 months. We just put it somewhere. We just said, okay, we're going to invest it. There was a lot of thought, obviously, in terms of our investment policy statement, etc.
Yes.
But given who we were and who was on our board, we didn't really have the capacity for impact and responsible investing. So one of the things we did in recruiting our board is really being mindful of board members we needed to be able to get us to that place as well.
Oh, great. So
listen, I just want to say there are organizations out there that I've been talking to, I've mentioned to you, but also Trottier Foundation. There's so many out there that's doing incredible work in impact investing, which gives me great hope, because these are role models that we look up to.
Absolutely. So what does success look like to you and your colleagues?
In terms of?
Just the overall success. Where would you like to see Definity? Where would Definity be happy? Or would you guys be like, yeah, we're successful, we're closing it down?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, I feel it's a little bit premature. We're just engaging in our first strategic planning process ever with the board to actually answer that question. And to also answer the question of how long we're going to exist.
Yeah.
Or when we can make the decision of how long we can exist, like to make the decision to know how long we're to exist for. The one thing we're clear on is the board has said, we don't want to exist in perpetuity. So if that's the case, we need to start thinking about, what does success look like for us? And we're just in the midst of doing that. So I feel I have ideas, obviously, but I feel it's a bit premature to share them, given that we haven't fully finished our planning process with the board.
Yes, absolutely.
See, for me, for this year, success would look like if we've been able to continue building the infrastructure we need to be able to do our programming in a really robust way that we continue to learn and make adjustments, to be flexible and nimble as a grant maker, to build relationships, to amplify the voices of our grantees, and to be able to engage in impact investing to the extent to which the board has approved, and we've not even reached there yet.
Thank you. Do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action?
No, for me, it's just that, look, the pandemic really brought out, and this isn't new information. We all know that the inequities were exacerbated, or, just came to light as a result of, things that have been happening in the world. And my only thing is, if we really want to advance, if we really want to advance equality, if we really want to advance justice, and if we really want to address, the wrongs that have been done, then we need to work together as one community marching forward. And so, and I've experienced, I need to say that I have experienced that when I first started. Everybody we talked to were so supportive, like the sector came alongside us to help us get to where we are today. Just helped us develop with our community investment framework. We're very generous with their time, their resources, their templates, like anything we needed, like even just thinking through the strategy, anything we needed. Like, we spoke to over 50 to 60 sector leaders, both in the philanthropic space, intermediaries, nonprofit space, and we were so humbled and honored by the generosity in which we were embraced. Like, people were generous with everything. And I just want to say, if we're like that together for every issue, we're going to be making, headway in a lot of areas, because none of us can, work alone. As I always say, the days of the lone wolf are over. Like, we have to work together in order to advance issues we deeply care about.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful note to leave this on. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your remarkable leadership, Arti.
Thanks, Sarah. And if I might add one more last thing.
Absolutely.
I just to acknowledge that we're part of an ecosystem. We're in the philanthropic space. Our approach is how we've decided to play in this ecosystem. I just want to say that, a lot of people are like, oh, you guys do things different, or, it's so great. It's not right or wrong. It's not like, I want to acknowledge that all of us in the ecosystem are taking different positions and places and spaces, and that it's all equally important, because the one-off grants to relieve, what do you call it? Oh my gosh, I'm losing my words, but one-off grants to, when you get hurricanes, or you get things like that happen, like you need immediate relief. You need immediate relief. That's just as important as funding projects on the ground, which is just as important as systems change work. It's just as important as collective. All I want to acknowledge is we're part of the same ecosystem. We're all chipping at it differently, but collectively, we're all making progress towards the mission that we want to achieve.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Arti. It was wonderful to speak with you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah.